Hey guys, tonight we step into a world of stone and candlelight. Imagine a corridor long and narrow, its walls cool beneath your fingertips. The air carries a faint scent of beeswax and old parchment. Footsteps echo softly then fade. Somewhere nearby, a single voice chants in measured rhythm, the syllables rising and falling like a tide that never quite reaches shore. This is the Byzantine world. Not only the gleaming domes of Constantinople, not only imperial processions glittering in gold and silk, but also the quiet monasteries scattered across rocky hillsides and along windswept coasts. Places where days were divided not by spectacle, but by prayer. In this episode, we will move gently between silence and splendor. We will begin inside a Byzantine monastery, where cold cells and long fasts shaped lives devoted to contemplation. From there, we will meet Emperor Justinian I, whose ambition reshaped law and skyline alike. We will witness the tremor of the Nika riots, explore the rediscovery of lost manuscripts, and trace theological debates that echoed through centuries. We will follow grain ships from Egypt, step into the machinery of imperial bureaucracy, and finally enter the great palace itself, where ceremony shimmered beneath mosaic ceilings. Through it all, we will notice a pattern. Repetition. Prayer repeated at dawn. Laws copied line by line. Grain shipments arriving season after season. Ceremonies enacted again and again. Silence and splendor, both necessary. Let us begin not in the palace but in the monastery, where the day starts long before the sun. You wake before the light arrives. There is no sudden noise, no rush. Only the awareness that darkness has thinned slightly, that the air has shifted from deep night toward something softer. Your cell is small. Stone walls. Pale, uneven, cool to the touch. A narrow slit of a window cut high above eye level. A wooden pallet layered with straw. A wool blanket folded with careful neatness at its edge. The air is cold. Stone remembers the night. It holds the chill and offers it back to you without apology. When you sit upright, your breath lingers faintly in front of your face. There are very few possessions. A clay oil lamp. A small wooden cross. Perhaps a manuscript, wrapped carefully in cloth. Nothing unnecessary. Nothing bright. You dress slowly in a simple woolen habit. The fabric is coarse but familiar. It brushes against your skin with quiet insistence. A rope belt is tied at your waist. Sandals slide onto your feet. Then it comes. The bell. It does not crash or demand. It resonates. A low, rounded tone rolling gently through corridor and courtyard. One note, then another. The sound seems to settle into the stone itself. You step into the hallway. The corridor smells faintly of lime plaster, oil smoke, and cool earth. Other monks move beside you. Heads bowed. Eyes lowered. No one speaks. There is no need. The chapel doors open with a muted creak. Inside, darkness lingers. Only a few oil lamps flicker before the icons. Gold backgrounds shimmer in soft flame light. Faces of Christ and the saints gaze outward, elongated and solemn, their expressions neither severe nor smiling. Simply present. You take your place. The chanting begins. Slow. Measured. Unhurried. Greek syllables rise and fall in steady cadence. The same psalms that were sung yesterday. The same ones that will be sung tomorrow. Words memorized so completely they feel less like recitation and more like breathing. Inhale. Exhale. Kyrie eleison. The sound does not fill the room aggressively. It settles like mist. It layers gently over itself. No single voice dominates. The chant becomes collective, almost anonymous. Time loosens here. Minutes stretch, but they do not strain. When prayer concludes, there is no applause, no dramatic pause. The monks disperse as quietly as they gathered. Dawn is just beginning to show pale silver at the edge of the sky. Now comes labor. Some monks step into the courtyard garden. Frost might cling to low herbs in winter. In warmer months, grapevines wind along trellises. Olive trees stand patient and twisted. Hands dig into soil. Water is drawn from a well. Buckets creak as ropes pull against stone rims. Other monks move toward the scriptorium. The scriptorium smells different. Parchment. Scraped leather. Wooden desks sit near narrow windows to capture what little natural light the day will offer. You sit. Before you lies stretched parchment, pale and smooth but not perfect. It bears faint traces of its origin. Subtle lines and textures from the animal skin it once was. In your hand, a reed pen trimmed carefully with a small knife. Beside you, ink mixed from soot and gum Arabic rests in a shallow dish. You begin copying. Letter by letter. Alpha, Beta, Gamma. The gospel text unfolds slowly beneath your hand. Or perhaps a commentary from a revered church father. Each character must be shaped with attention. Ink must not blot. Lines must remain straight. Mistakes are costly. Parchment is expensive. There are no stacks of spare paper waiting nearby. If you err, correction requires careful scraping with a blade, removing the topmost layer gently, patiently. The only sound is scratching, soft, persistent, almost soothing. Hours pass like this. Your back stiffens slightly. Fingers cramp, then relax. Outside the window, light strengthens and shifts, then softens again. There is no dramatic interruption. At midday, a modest meal. Bread torn by hand. Olives. Lentil stew in a clay bowl. Water or diluted wine poured into simple cups. Conversation remains minimal. Some monasteries observe strict silence during meals, with scripture read aloud instead. Food is functional, nourishing but never indulgent. Fasting days are frequent. Meat is rare. Cheese limited. The purpose is discipline, not punishment but training. Hunger becomes familiar, not frightening. After the meal, prayer again. The hours are structured carefully. Matins before dawn. Prime, terce, sext, none. Vespers as light fades. Compline before sleep. The rhythm shapes the day as firmly as stone shapes the walls. In winter, the cold deepens. Ink thickens slightly in its dish. Fingers grow stiff while copying text. Breath clouds faintly in unheated rooms. In summer, heat gathers in enclosed spaces. Beeswax candles soften. Sweat beads along your brow as you lean over parchment. Still, the work continues. Monasteries are not isolated from the world even if they appear so. Travelers arrive seeking shelter. Villagers request counsel. Occasionally, imperial messengers bring letters. Requests for prayers. Theological questions. Invitations to councils. Within these quiet walls, ideas are refined. Debates about doctrine are drafted into careful prose. Sermons are composed that will echo in distant cathedrals. Ancient manuscripts are preserved, recopied, guarded. Some texts are hidden deliberately during times of unrest. Sealed in jars. Tucked into wall cavities. Placed in chests beneath floorboards. The monk's life appears repetitive. It is repetitive. Prayer. Or reading. Silence. But repetition is its strength. Outside the monastery, Constantinople rises in splendor. Markets bustling. Courtiers negotiating. Emperors issuing decrees. The city alive with color and ceremony. Inside the monastery, ink dries slowly. Candles burn steadily. Breath moves in rhythm with chant. And though the monk may never sit upon a throne or command an army, the words copied here will outlast emperors. The discipline practiced here will steady bishops and advisors. The prayers whispered here will accompany imperial ambition like a quiet shadow. Night returns. You step once more into the chapel. The final office of prayer concludes. Lamps are extinguished one by one. Smoke curls upward and disappears into darkness. Back in your cell, you lie upon straw and wool. Stone walls cool again around you. The world beyond these walls continues to shift. Politics, trade, unrest, construction. But here the bell will ring again before dawn, and you will rise. Far from the cool restraint of the monastery, the capital wakes in layers of sound. Constantinople does not rise quietly. It unfolds. First comes the faint wash of the Bosporus against the seawalls. Then the low murmur of vendors arranging baskets of figs and bread. Hooves strike stone streets in steady rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a gate creaks open within the massive Theodosian walls. And above it all, the skyline. Domes, columns, bronze statues catching early light. At the center of this immense and intricate city stands one man, Justinian I. He was not born in the marble halls he would later command. His early life began in the rural Balkans, in a village far removed from imperial ceremony. His family spoke Latin. His upbringing was modest, yet proximity to power changed everything. His uncle, Justin, rose through the army ranks and eventually became emperor. Justinian followed closely, absorbing education, law, theology, and administration. When Justinian took the throne in 527, he inherited continuity but also tension. The Western Roman Empire had fallen decades earlier. Germanic kingdoms ruled Italy and North Africa. Persia remained a powerful rival in the east. Within Constantinople, religious disagreements simmered beneath public devotion. Justinian's ambition was not impulsive. It was systematic. He wanted restoration. Restoration of Roman territory. Restoration of Roman order. Restoration of Roman law. The law came first. Over centuries, imperial edicts had accumulated in enormous quantity. Contradictions overlapped with clarifications. Legal scholars debated obscure precedents. Judges navigated shelves heavy with scrolls. Justinian ordered clarity. He assembled a commission of jurists led by Tribonian. Their task was immense. They sifted through centuries of legal texts, extracting what remained relevant, discarding redundancy, refining language. The result became the Corpus Juris Civilis, the Code, the Digest, the Institutes, the Novelli. Each part organized, deliberate, precise. This was not dramatic reform. There were no parades celebrating clauses and statutes, but its impact was enduring. The codification influenced legal systems far beyond Byzantium, echoing through medieval Europe and into modern civil law traditions. While scholars worked in quiet chambers, the emperor turned to architecture. In 532, much of Constantinople's center lay damaged after unrest. The earlier cathedral of Hagia Sophia had burned. The city bore visible scars. Justinian saw opportunity. He did not intend to rebuild modestly. He summoned two brilliant minds, Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus. Engineers, mathematicians, visionaries. They designed a structure that defied expectation. A vast dome suspended over an enormous interior space. Windows placed at its base so that light would dissolve its weight. Marble columns gathered from distant provinces. Green Thessalian stone. Purple porphyry. White marble veined in subtle gray. Construction advanced rapidly. Laborers hauled stone. Craftsmen shaped capitals with intricate carvings. Mosaicists prepared tiny tesserae of gold-backed glass. Imagine entering the completed Hagia Sophia in 537. Light filters through dozens of windows. The dome appears to hover as though suspended by invisible threads. The interior glows softly. Sound travels differently here. A whisper seems to linger. When Justinian entered for the dedication, tradition says he spoke words of triumph, comparing the building to Solomon's temple. Whether embellished or exact, the message was unmistakable. Empire expressed in stone. Yet Justinian's reach extended far beyond the capital. He sought to reclaim former Roman territories. His general Belisarius sailed to North Africa and defeated the Vandals. Campaigns followed in Italy against the Ostrogoths. For a time, imperial banners flew again over Rome and Ravenna. These victories required immense resources. Soldiers had to be paid. Ships provisioned. Grain transported from Egypt to sustain the population of Constantinople. Taxes were levied carefully but firmly. Restoration was costly. Within the palace, Justinian's daily life was disciplined. He was known to work long hours, sometimes late into the night. Lamps burned steadily in administrative chambers. Petitions were reviewed. Reports from governors read. Diplomatic correspondence drafted. He did not rule alone. Beside him stood Empress Theodora, intelligent, resilient, politically perceptive. Her counsel would prove decisive during moments of crisis. She had risen from humble origins herself, and her presence at court challenged conventional expectations. Court life was structured by ceremony. Audiences were choreographed carefully. Officials entered according to rank. Robes shimmered with silk woven in imperial workshops. Gold thread caught the light. Eunuchs managed access to inner chambers. Silence was maintained until speech was permitted. Hierarchy was visible in posture, in clothing, in proximity. Yet beneath the ritual surface, tension always existed. The capital was crowded. The hippodrome, capable of holding tens of thousands, was not merely a sporting arena. It was a gathering place where political sentiments could find voice. The blues and the greens, chariot racing factions, carried loyalties that extended beyond sport into identity and influence. Justinian balanced these forces carefully. He sought religious unity, but theological disputes proved persistent. Debates over Christ's nature divided communities. Edicts attempted compromise. Councils convened. Empire was not static. It required constant adjustment, constant oversight, constant repetition. In one chamber, legal texts were copied meticulously. In another, architects measured curvature for domes. In another, tax officials calculated grain shipments arriving from Egypt. And above it all, Justinian watched. Not with theatrical flourish, but with sustained intensity. He believed in order, in clarity, in grandeur that reflected divine favor. Yet even the most carefully structured empire can tremble. Soon, the tension within Constantinople would erupt in a way that tested imperial resolve to its limit. For now, picture the emperor at his desk. Scrolls unrolled before him. Wax tablets bearing notes. A lamp casting steady light across parchment. Outside, the city breathes. Inside, law and ambition take shape quietly. Constantinople is a city of layers. Markets hum beside churches. Senators pass fishermen in narrow streets. Silk robes brush against rough wool cloaks. The sacred and the ordinary share the same stone pavements. And at the heart of the city stands the hippodrome. It is vast, long and curved, capable of holding tens of thousands. Marble seats rise in tiers. Statues line the central spine. Bronze horses gleam in sunlight. The emperor watches from a private box connected directly to the palace. On race days, the air changes. Crowds gather early. Vendors move between rows selling bread and watered wine. Children sit on their father's shoulders. The energy is not chaotic but charged, expectant. Two primary factions dominate the races, the blues and the greens. They are more than teams. They are identities. They represent neighborhoods, professions, loyalties. Their colors are worn proudly. Their chants rise in waves. When the chariots line up, horses restless and nostrils flaring, the stadium quiets for a brief moment. Then the gates open. Hooves strike earth. Wheels rattle. Dust lifts into sunlight. The crowd leans forward as one body. Victory matters. Defeat stings. But beneath the spectacle lies something deeper. The hippodrome is one of the few places where large crowds can address the emperor directly. Petitions are shouted. Complaints voiced. Approval expressed or withheld. It is a pressure valve. In January 532, tension had been building. Arrests had followed earlier unrest. Members of both the Blues and the Greens faced execution for crimes related to disturbances. 2 men survived a failed execution attempt and sought refuge in a church. Crowds grew restless. On a cold January day, races proceeded as scheduled. The emperor took his seat in the kathisma, the imperial viewing box. The factions began with their usual chants. But something shifted. The shouting changed tone. Instead of rivalry, the Blues and Greens united. They shouted one word. Nika. Victory. Not victory in sport. Victory over grievances. The chant echoed across the hippodrome. It reverberated against stone walls. It carried beyond the stadium into surrounding streets. Unrest spread quickly. Fires broke out in parts of the city. Buildings were damaged. Crowds surged unpredictably. The earlier cathedral of Hagia Sophia was consumed in flames. Administrative buildings suffered similar fate. Smoke rose above Constantinople. Inside the palace, uncertainty settled. Justinian faced a decision. Some advisors suggested departure. Ships waited at the harbor. Escape was possible. The empire could continue from elsewhere, but departure would signal weakness. According to later accounts, Empress Theodora spoke firmly. She is said to have argued that imperial dignity was not easily abandoned, that purple robes made a fine burial shroud. Whether her exact words were preserved accurately or shaped by later historians, her resolve was remembered. Justinian remained. He chose confrontation. General Belisarius, already known for military competence, was summoned. Loyal troops were assembled quietly. The hippodrome, still crowded with demonstrators who had even proclaimed a rival emperor, became the focal point. We will not dwell on the violence that followed. Instead, understand the scale. The unrest ended decisively. Order was restored. The cost was heavy. Contemporary sources speak of significant loss of life. The hippodrome fell silent afterward in a way it had not before. Smoke cleared gradually over the city. Charred beams were removed. Ash swept aside. Reconstruction began. From devastation emerged opportunity. Justinian seized the moment to rebuild more grandly than before. The destruction of the earlier cathedral made way for the monumental Hagia Sophia we described earlier. Streets were reorganized. Structures reinforced. The Nika riots revealed something essential about Byzantine power. Authority was immense but not untouchable. The people could gather. They could shout. They could threaten stability. Yet the imperial system, when pressed, responded with force and with rebuilding. After the riots, ceremony continued. Races resumed eventually. Crowds returned. The emperor appeared again in the Kathisma. The city did not dissolve into chaos permanently, but memory lingered. Within monasteries, monks may have prayed for stability. Within bureaucratic offices, officials recalculated policies. Within the palace, vigilance sharpened. The riots were not merely a moment of unrest. They were a test of imperial will, a test of urban tension, a reminder that even an emperor who codified law and built soaring domes ruled a city of human emotion. Constantinople settled again into rhythm. Markets reopened. Ships arrived with grain. Chants softened into routine applause. And somewhere in a quiet monastery cell, a monk continued copying scripture, unaware that his city had trembled so violently. From unrest and fire, we now turn to preservation. Because even as cities burned, manuscripts survived. Hidden in cupboards, sealed in chests, carried across provinces. In the next segment, we will follow those texts and discover how Byzantine monasteries became guardians of knowledge long after the smoke had cleared. After the fire, there is ash. After ash, there is quiet. Constantinople rebuilt itself in stone and marble. Domes rose higher. Walls were reinforced. Streets cleared of debris. Life resumed its layered rhythm. But beyond the capital, in monasteries perched on cliffs or hidden in wooded valleys, something else endured. Parchment. Words. The Byzantine world inherited the intellectual legacy of Greece and Rome. Philosophical treatises, medical manuals, mathematical diagrams, theological reflections, histories of long-vanished wars. These texts did not survive automatically. They survived because someone copied them. Picture again the scriptorium. Wooden desks aligned near narrow windows. A monk bends over parchment. His pen moves steadily, shaping letters with deliberate care. Outside, wind brushes against stone walls. Inside, time feels suspended. Each manuscript is fragile. Parchment can mold in damp air. Ink can fade. Fire can erase in moments what took months to copy. So monasteries developed habits of preservation. Texts were wrapped in cloth, stored in wooden chests, placed on shelves high above ground moisture. Some monasteries built libraries within thick walls, where temperature remained stable. When danger approached, manuscripts could be hidden. There were periods of conflict across Byzantine territories, raids along frontiers, political upheaval, religious controversy. In uncertain times, books were sometimes concealed in jars or sealed within cavities in walls. Hidden deliberately. Waiting. Centuries passed. Some monasteries flourished. Others declined. Some were abandoned. Roofs collapsed slowly. Dust gathered. Yet in remote corners of the empire, texts remained undisturbed. Works by ancient philosophers such as Aristotle, medical writings by Galen, speeches by Demosthenes, commentaries by early Christian theologians. They survived not because of imperial ambition, but because of quiet repetition, letter by letter, line by line. In later centuries, particularly during the Renaissance in Western Europe, scholars began seeking ancient texts with renewed intensity. Travelers journeyed eastward. They visited monasteries in the Byzantine world and beyond. They asked to see libraries. Sometimes what they found astonished them. Manuscripts long thought lost in the Latin West still existed in Greek copies preserved by Byzantine monks. Texts that had quietly endured within stone walls suddenly entered new intellectual currents. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked a turning point. As the city came under Ottoman control, some scholars fled westward, carrying manuscripts with them. Greek texts circulated more widely in Italy and elsewhere, influencing humanist scholarship. But before that moment of transfer, there were centuries of patient guardianship. In dim rooms lit by oil lamps, monks continued copying. They did not know that future generations would call this preservation heroic. They did not imagine Renaissance academies debating the text they preserved. They simply continued. Copying a page might take hours. Illuminating a single initial letter in gold and blue pigment might require days. Margins sometimes contain notes, corrections, quiet reflections by generations of readers. A manuscript was not only a text, it was a layered object, a conversation across time. Even damaged manuscripts were valued. If a page tore, it might be repaired with stitching. If ink faded, later hands might retrace letters carefully. There is something profoundly calm about this process. Outside, empires rise and tremble. Crowds gather. Armies march. Inside, a monk trims his pen and continues writing. Preservation requires patience, and patience shaped the intellectual continuity of Byzantium. Theological debates, which we will soon explore more deeply, depended upon these preserved texts. Councils quoted earlier authorities. Arguments referenced scripture and earlier commentaries. Without manuscripts, there would be no debate. Knowledge traveled slowly. A text copied in one monastery might take years to reach another, carried by a traveler, exchanged as a gift, requested by a bishop. And yet, over centuries, a network formed. Stone monasteries scattered across mountains and islands, connected not by roads alone, but by parchment. When we think of empires, we often imagine armies and palaces. But sometimes endurance depends on ink, on quiet hands shaping letters and steady lines. As candles burn low and a copied page dries, we begin to sense the deeper spiritual currents flowing through Byzantine life. Because these manuscripts did not merely preserve philosophy and medicine, they preserved theology. And theology in Byzantium was never abstract. It shaped ritual, art, politics, identity. In the next segment, we will enter that world of icons, incense, and doctrinal controversy. A world where images could divide communities and where devotion and disagreement intertwined. For now, imagine a final page completed. The monk sets down his pen. Ink glistens briefly before settling into parchment. Another voice from the past has been carried forward. Step quietly into a Byzantine church. The threshold is worn smooth by countless feet. As you pass inside, the noise of the street softens almost immediately. Sound behaves differently here. It lingers, it settles. The air is warm and faintly sweet with incense. Beeswax candles flicker in small clusters before painted panels. Light moves gently across gold backgrounds, making the walls seem almost alive. Icons surround you. Christ looks outward from the apse, his gaze steady and unblinking. The Virgin holds the Christ child with a gravity that feels both maternal and eternal. Saints line the walls in ordered ranks, elongated figures draped in deep blues, earthy reds, and soft greens. Their faces are calm. Their eyes are large and luminous. In Byzantium, theology was not hidden in distant libraries. It was visible, tangible, present in every liturgy. The central mystery of Orthodox belief was the Incarnation. The conviction that God became human in the person of Christ. Fully divine, fully human, not divided, not diluted. This mystery shaped everything. If God truly entered material existence, then matter itself carried potential. Wood and pigment could bear sacred meaning. Stone and mosaic could speak theology without words. Icons were not merely decoration. They were described as windows. Not windows you see through physically, but windows of attention. When a believer stood before an icon, the veneration offered was directed beyond the wood itself toward the holy figure represented. A candle placed before an icon was not for the paint. It was for what the paint signified. Yet not everyone agreed. Questions arose slowly at first, then more sharply. Could the divine truly be represented in image? Did any depiction risk limiting what should remain beyond representation? In the 8th century, controversy intensified. Certain emperors, concerned about idolatry and perhaps influenced by theological and political pressures, ordered the removal of icons. This period became known as iconoclasm. Walls were stripped of imagery. Painted faces were covered or destroyed. Monks who defended icons sometimes faced exile or pressure. Communities found themselves divided. Imagine entering a church once radiant with color and finding the walls bare. The absence itself would feel heavy. Not violent in sound, but heavy in meaning. For decades, the empire moved between restriction and restoration. Arguments were written carefully in theological treatises. Monks cited earlier authorities. Bishops gathered in councils. The debate was not about art alone. It was about the nature of Christ. If Christ could not be depicted, was his humanity incomplete? If he could be depicted, did that compromise divine transcendence? The discussion required precision. Words like nature, essence, person carried weight. A single term could alter meaning significantly. Eventually, icon veneration was restored. In 843, the so-called triumph of orthodoxy marked the formal end of iconoclasm. Icons returned to churches. Processions celebrated their restoration. But the memory of controversy lingered. It shaped caution. It deepened reflection. Inside liturgy, theology unfolded in layers. The divine liturgy of St. John Chrysostom moved with deliberate rhythm. Deacons processed with censers swinging gently. Incense rose in soft spirals. Choirs responded antiphonally, their chants weaving together like threads in silk. The congregation stood for long periods. There were no pews as in later Western churches. Standing was an act of participation. Bodies attentive. Minds directed upward. The iconostasis, a screen adorned with icons, separated the nave from the sanctuary. It did not conceal entirely, but it suggested mystery. Certain moments of the liturgy occurred behind it, partially hidden. Revelation and concealment existed side by side. Orthodox theology emphasized that God could be known, yet never fully comprehended. Experienced, yet never contained. In monasteries, monks studied the writings of earlier theologians. Basil the Great, Gregory of Nazianzus, John of Damascus, who wrote passionately in defense of icons. These texts were copied carefully in scriptoria like the one we visited earlier. Theology was preserved not only in argument but in hymn. Feast days brought particular chants. At Easter, the proclamation of resurrection echoed through churches with restrained yet unmistakable joy. During Lent, melodies grew more contemplative, almost austere. The calendar structured spiritual life just as the hours structured monastic routine. Repetition again. Year after year, the same feasts returned. The same icons were carried in procession. The same prayers were spoken. This repetition was not stagnation. It was continuity. Imperial power intertwined with theology. An emperor crowned in Hagia Sophia was anointed within sacred ritual. He was seen not merely as administrator, but as protector of orthodoxy. His legitimacy was reinforced by alignment with correct belief. When theological disputes intensified, emperors often intervened. Councils were convened. Decrees issued. Unity was sought, sometimes imperfectly. Faith shaped policy. Policy shaped faith. And through it all, the icon remained. A small wooden panel kissed gently by a worshiper. a mosaic high above the altar catching morning light, a portable icon carried into battle or placed beside a sickbed. Images offered stability. In times of unrest, when cities trembled or borders shifted, the steady gaze of an icon provided familiarity, a reminder that beyond imperial change, something eternal endured. Stand again inside the church. Notice the quiet murmur of prayer, the soft crackle of candle wick, the faint shimmer of gold leaf as flame moves. Theological debates may have shaped empires, but here in this moment, faith feels intimate. A bowed head, a whispered petition, silence beneath a dome. As incense drifts upward and fades, we step outward once more. Because even the most luminous liturgy depends upon grain in storehouses, ships at harbor, and trade routes that stretch far beyond the capital. In the next segment, we will follow the grain ships from Egypt and trace the Mediterranean networks that fed Constantinople. For now, remain still. The icon gazes outward. The candle burns steadily. The chant continues, soft and unhurried. Step out from the incense-filled church and toward the harbor. The air changes immediately. Salt replaces beeswax. Wind carries the cry of gulls. Ropes creak against wooden masts. The harbor of Constantinople is never truly silent. Even at dawn there is movement. The city is vast. Its population rises into the hundreds of thousands during its height. Such a concentration of people cannot survive on prayer and ceremony alone. It survives on grain. Much of that grain comes from Egypt. Each year, fleets of ships travel northward across the Mediterranean, carrying wheat harvested from the fertile Nile Valley. The rhythm of the Nile's flooding determines the rhythm of Constantinople's bread. When the river rises predictably, fields flourish. When harvest is strong, storehouses in Alexandria fill. When ships depart on schedule, the capital breathes easily. Picture a grain ship approaching the city. Its hull rides low in the water, heavy with cargo. Sailcloth strains gently in the wind. Sailors adjust ropes with practiced efficiency. The journey has taken weeks. Storms may have delayed progress. Pirates remain a distant concern. Yet the ship arrives. At the harbor, officials wait. Cargo is recorded carefully. Quantities measured. Taxes assessed. The imperial administration does not leave such matters to chance. Grain is life. Life must be accounted for. Large granaries stand near the waterfront. Massive structures built to store wheat safely, protected from moisture and pests. Workers unload sacks steadily, forming human chains that move rhythmically from dock to warehouse. Inside the city, bakeries depend upon these deliveries. Bread is not a luxury. It is expectation. The government often provides grain distributions to citizens. Ensuring stable bread supply reduces unrest. When shipments arrive late or harvests fail, anxiety spreads quickly. Grain is political. Egypt's importance to Byzantium cannot be overstated. Control of its agricultural output stabilizes the capital. Loss of access would threaten food security immediately. Trade routes extend beyond grain. Silk travels from distant lands, sometimes through complex intermediaries. Spices arrive in small quantities, precious and aromatic. Olive oil moves in amphorae. Wine is transported along coastal routes. Timber, metals, and textiles circulate steadily. Constantinople sits at a crossroads. The Bosporus connects Black Sea to Mediterranean. Caravans approach from Anatolia. Ships arrive from Syria, North Africa, and the Aegean Islands. Markets reflect this diversity. Walk through a market street near the harbor. Spices are displayed in shallow bowls. Their scents mingle. Pepper, cinnamon, dried herbs. Fishmongers arrange their catch on wooden tables. Cloth merchants unroll bolts of dyed fabric. Voices bargain not angrily but persistently. Coins change hands. Scales weigh goods carefully. The imperial bureaucracy monitors trade closely. Customs duties are collected. Harbor officials maintain records. Inspectors verify quality. Bureaucrats track shipments with meticulous detail. Trade is not chaotic. It is regulated. The same administrative precision that shaped Justinian's legal code extends to commerce. Stability depends on oversight. Yet despite careful management, vulnerability remains. A failed Nile flood, a naval defeat, a blockade. Any disruption to Mediterranean routes could ripple outward into the capital's streets. When bread grows scarce, murmurs grow louder. The memory of unrest during the Nika riots would have sharpened imperial awareness. Food security becomes part of political strategy. Beyond grain and goods, trade fosters cultural exchange. Ideas travel with merchants. Languages mix in dockside conversations. Religious practices encounter one another in subtle ways. Foreign envoys arrive bearing gifts and observing customs. The harbor is a place of encounter. It smells of tar and salt and damp rope. It hums with labor. It reflects sunlight off restless water. And always there is movement. Ships departing. Ships arriving. Cargo shifting from hull to warehouse. Without this steady circulation, the liturgies of Hagia Sophia would falter. The palace banquets would diminish. The urban population would thin. Trade sustains splendor. Grain sustains prayer. As evening falls, lanterns are lit along the docks. Crews rest aboard their vessels. Officials finalize their tallies. Bakers prepare dough for morning ovens. The cycle continues. Harvest, shipment, arrival, distribution, repetition once more. From harbor warehouses, we now move inward to the machinery that coordinates all of this complexity. Because behind every shipment, every tax record, every imperial decree, there stands an intricate hierarchy of officials. In the next segment, we will enter the world of imperial bureaucracy and court hierarchy. Eunuchs, senators, clergy, and administrators who sustain the empire through paperwork and ceremony alike. For now, listen to the gentle knock of a ship against the dock. Feel the steady breath of the sea. The city rests tonight because the grain has arrived. Step away from the bustling harbor and ascend into the administrative heart of Constantinople. Imagine stone corridors lined with doors opening to offices where the work of empire hums quietly. Paper and ink, petitions and ledgers, stamps and seals, all move in slow, deliberate rhythm. Here, power is measured less by swords and more by signatures and schedules. The Byzantine bureaucracy is intricate. Layers of officials, each with specific duties, form a lattice that sustains the empire. At the top, the emperor rules with ceremonial precision, surrounded by a court whose complexity reflects centuries of accumulated tradition. But beneath the splendor, daily operations depend upon countless individuals who are often unseen. Eunuchs hold prominent positions. Their unique status allows them to move between palace and religious authority without the distractions or conflicts of familial inheritance. They manage correspondence, oversee court ceremonies, and administer aspects of the imperial household. Their presence is constant, disciplined, and quietly influential. Senators sit in chambers lined with marble, reviewing petitions from provinces, considering laws, and advising on matters both mundane and extraordinary. Their robes rustle softly as they shift, and their discussions proceed with measured voices, deliberate gestures, and subtle hierarchies of seniority and precedence. Every word counts, every pause is observed. Clergy intertwine with administration. Bishops and archbishops handle religious law, ensure doctrinal orthodoxy, and advise on ceremonies. They monitor monasteries and convents, confirm feast schedules, and report on theological disputes. Their influence permeates civic life. Decisions in the capital ripple outward, shaping villages, marketplaces, and monasteries alike. Scrolls and ledgers are transported with care. Couriers on horseback, messengers through quiet streets, and porters in palace corridors ensure the flow of information. Every shipment of grain, every tax record, every edict passes through these channels. The system is painstaking, deliberate, and repetitive. Its success depends on adherence to order. Hierarchy dominates daily life. Titles define access, privileges, and expectations. Officials know their place in the chain. Clerks know theirs, messengers theirs. A single misstep might not cause chaos, but it could delay shipments, misfile a decree, or miscommunicate orders, a subtle disruption with far-reaching consequences. The court itself functions as both stage and office. Audiences are ceremonial yet practical. Visitors line up for audiences with precise timing. They kneel or bow according to strict protocol. Gifts are presented, documents exchanged, and questions addressed. All interactions reinforce status, loyalty, and order. Documentation is meticulous. Every decision, from assigning land to levying taxes, is recorded. Lead seals are pressed into wax. Parchments are stored carefully in libraries or archives. This record-keeping is not merely bureaucratic, it is survival. Imperial memory relies upon paper and parchment as much as on loyalty and vigilance. Even in quiet hours, the pulse of administration continues. Clerks tally accounts by candlelight. Eunuchs patrol corridors, ensuring that protocols are followed. Advisors consult in hushed tones, navigating the intersection of law, custom, and ceremonial expectation. It is monotonous, exacting work, but essential. The hierarchy is also performative. Ceremonies reinforce authority, from the coronation of the emperor to the simple confirmation of a decree. Uniforms, titles, gestures, and seating arrangements all communicate the invisible order holding the empire together. This order is subtle, almost invisible, yet omnipresent. Contrast this with the streets below. Merchants, sailors, laborers, and clergy all depend on this system. Grain reaches bakeries. Laws maintain civic order. Feasts proceed without interruption. Even liturgies in Hagia Sophia rely on the paperwork, planning, and preparation behind the scenes. The Byzantine bureaucracy, like the empire itself, is sustained by repetition. Daily routines, monthly audits, annual ceremonies, all form a rhythm as steady as candle flickers and the tolling of bells. Discipline ensures continuity. Structure preserves stability. As evening approaches, the corridors quiet. Ledgers are closed. Candles flicker low. Eunuchs retire to private quarters. Clerks finish the last calculations of the day. The emperor's advisors leave chambers, carrying with them the weight of decisions made in silence. The machinery rests momentarily, only to resume with dawn. And yet, without this unseen work, the empire's grandeur, its palaces, icons, fleets, and markets, could not endure. Splendor depends upon order. Luxury floats on disciplined, repetitive labor, much of it invisible to the untrained eye. From these administrative halls, we now move to the pinnacle of Byzantine life, the great palace itself. Here, silk drapes, glittering mosaics, and ceremonial banquets present the polished exterior that masks the countless hours of preparation, protocol, and quiet labor that sustain it. Step through the heavy doors of the great palace. The first sensation is coolness. Stone floors absorb the sunlight streaming through latticed windows. Shadows shift slowly, following the arc of the day. Here, the empire's rhythm slows, though it remains deliberate and precise. Every movement, every object, every sound is measured, deliberate, and meaningful. Silks brush softly against stone as attendants move along corridors. Colors are rich yet subdued, deep blues, muted golds, crimson accents. Fabrics shimmer quietly in candlelight. No sound startles the calm, but the presence of labor is always felt. Servants carry folded textiles, water vessels, trays of fruit, all performed with disciplined repetition. The emperor appears in ceremonial garments. Gold embroidery glints faintly. A diadem rests lightly, signaling authority rather than ostentation. Courtiers kneel or bow with subtle gestures. Their positions and postures are rehearsed, part of a choreography developed over decades. Each action communicates hierarchy without a word. Mosaics adorn walls and floors. Tesserae glint with a soft, diffused light, depicting saints, emperors, and allegorical figures. The imagery reinforces continuity. Every figure, every gesture tells a story of power, faith, and empire. Even the polished floors reflect light like water, echoing the rhythm of the harbor and the meticulous labor that sustains the city outside. Banquets unfold quietly. Dishes arrive in sequence. Meat, grains, fruit, and wine are presented not in haste, but as part of ceremony. Each course is a visual and sensory demonstration of wealth, order, and culture. Conversations are soft, formal, weighted with expectation. Attentive servants stand by, ready to respond with precision. Private chambers display both luxury and restraint. Ivory inlays, carved wooden panels, and delicate furnishings are arranged with intention. Textiles cover surfaces to both protect and decorate. Beds, low and firm, are covered in embroidered linens. Cushions line seating areas. The environment communicates comfort, but one that is structured, not indulgent. Every element serves function as well as form. The palace is not only residence, it is the administrative heart. Edicts are drafted in study rooms. Messengers arrive and depart. Courtiers deliver reports and petitions. Even leisure is framed by ritual. Music performed at prescribed hours, poetry recited in measured cadence, and prayer interwoven through the day. Discipline permeates life. Security is ever present yet subtle. Guards move quietly along corridors, eyes attentive but unobtrusive. Access is controlled with layers of hierarchy and protocol. The palace is a microcosm of the empire. Every movement, every word, every decision reinforces structure, order, and stability. From balconies, the city spreads outward. The Golden Horn glints faintly, its waters reflecting sunlight in quiet ripples. Minarets, church domes, and marketplaces mark the landscape. Ships in the harbor rise and fall with gentle rhythm, echoing the city's pulse. All of it is connected: trade, labor, administration, faith, and ceremony. Evening brings soft illumination. Candles and lanterns glow against polished walls. Attendants quietly prepare for night. Courtiers withdraw to private chambers. The emperor rests, surrounded by the rhythm of repetition and ritual. The palace breathes slowly, a deliberate organism sustained by human discipline and centuries of tradition. Life inside the great palace is both quiet and commanding. It reflects the empire itself, disciplined, layered, and interconnected. Splendor is never accidental. It rests on the careful balance of labor, ceremony, administration, and devotion, each component working in unhurried, measured rhythm. And so, we leave the palace corridors for a moment, stepping back to contemplate the entirety of Byzantine life. From solitary monks in cold cells to the grandeur of silk and mosaic, the empire thrives through the continuity of repetition, ritual, and attention. The candlelight fades slowly. The city outside quiets. The empire endures in calm, deliberate motion. As our journey through Constantinople draws to a close, pause for a moment and allow the city, the empire, and its people to settle softly in your mind. We have walked through stone corridors of monasteries, the flickering candlelight reflecting off cold walls. We have smelled incense, felt the labor of monks copying manuscripts, and heard the quiet repetition of daily prayer. We have witnessed the tension of theological debates, the careful veneration of icons, and the rhythm of liturgical chant. We have followed the grain fleets from Egypt, watched their steady arrival in the harbor, and felt the quiet pulse of the marketplace as goods changed hands in calm, deliberate cadence. The empire depended on bureaucracy, a web of eunuchs, senators, and clerics working behind the scenes, each act purposeful, each gesture reinforcing structure. Then, ascending to the palace, we saw the measured luxury of marble floors, glittering mosaics, and silk garments. Ceremonial banquets proceeded with meticulous order. Life within these walls was deliberate, orchestrated, and unhurried. Every movement, every sound, every light reflected centuries of tradition and careful attention. The Byzantine Empire was vast, yet it functioned through repetition and rhythm. Discipline underpinned faith, labor sustained splendor, and ritual reinforced authority. Monks, clerks, merchants, sailors, courtiers, each contributed in their own way, quietly, steadily, and persistently. Their lives, though vastly different, were interconnected, forming a continuous, unbroken flow that allowed Constantinople to endure. Even as centuries passed and empires rose and fell, the patterns we observed remained strikingly familiar. Order depends on repetition. Luxury is built upon diligence. Faith and discipline coexist in harmony. Small, daily acts create continuity. The grandeur of domes, the shimmer of mosaics, the steady rhythm of the harbor, all are the visible signs of human effort layered over time. As you settle back, let your mind trace these patterns gently. Imagine the slow flicker of candlelight in a monastery cell. Hear the soft creak of ropes on the docks. Picture courtiers moving with quiet precision in palace corridors. Feel the rhythm of life, calm yet purposeful, and allow it to lull you into a reflective stillness. The empire persists not in sudden events or dramatic battles alone, but in subtle, persistent acts repeated across generations. In the silent copying of manuscripts, the measured storage of grain, the meticulous organization of a court, the soft echo of prayer, there is continuity, there is endurance, there is life. Let the images linger as you drift. Constantinople, in all its layered complexity, exists now in memory. The candlelight dims. The harbor grows still. The city sleeps, as do its people, beneath the dome of sky, beneath the weight of history. Rest now, with the quiet understanding that civilizations rise and endure through countless unseen, patient, and deliberate acts. And as the city rests, so may you, carried gently into the calm night of reflection and sleep.